Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and welcome back to something I like to call Stories from the Maelstrom, a recap of the day's games for this past week of real time. All right, everyone, this will be the final regular season update probably for the season because there's only one day left, 4 games, to finish out the regular season, and pretty much everything's been determined. World Series teams, home field advantage, and all of that fun stuff. So the next time I make a video, it'll probably be, gearing up for the World Series, but also I'll go through kind of the regular season stats to see who the leaders are at that point. But just wanted to take a minute to play 2 more days of games since the last update. And so just wanted to kind of show you some interesting stories or interesting things that happened in those games. So I'm not going to cover every game, but I'm going to cover the kind of the highlights of these last 2 days. So first of all, the St. Louis Wizards facing the Chicago Docks. And I guess the most notable thing for this, the reason I mention it, is because the Wizards have shut out the Docks in back-to-back games at this point. The first of those shutouts came from Steve Carlton, who allowed 7 hits, struck out 11, and walked 2. He's now 8-4 is where he'll finish the regular season, facing off against Kurt Schilling, who has had trouble with the home run and continued to do so in this game, allowing 3 homers, 11 earned runs, 16 hits in 5 1/3 inning. He's definitely struggled in the league. He will finish. Schilling finishes with a 7.16 ERA, so way under expectations for him. Meanwhile, Carlton, a little note about Carlton's shutout here. This is his 2nd straight shutout, so he had a shutout in his last start. It's the 2nd time this season he's had back-to-back shutouts, so he will end the regular season with 4 shutouts. So 4 of his 8 wins are shutouts. Finishes with a 2.97 ERA, and he'll be someone to look forward to in the World Series as the Wizards gear up for that. The other shutout here was by Carl Hubble, who allowed just 3 hits, struck out 9, and he improves to 9-1. Now, the interesting thing about Hubble is that this is his first shutout of the season, though there were 2 games earlier in the year where he left due to injury in the middle of his start. And in those games, he had allowed no earned runs or no runs by the time he left those games. One was like 5 1/3 inning. One was 6 innings, I believe. So he had to leave both of those games before he had a chance to complete the shutout. Unsure whether he would have completed it or not. But this was his first shutout of the season. In his last start here, he'll end with a 2.71 ERA. And I believe that puts him in the lead for National League wins with 9. The best record, 9-1. He's only lost 1 game this year. So this is the last 2 games for the Wizards, dominating as they head towards the final game of the season, also against Chicago, and then they'll gear up for the World Series. Detroit still had a shot of home field advantage. Of course, they needed the Wizards to lose all of their games, and they needed to win out in theirs. But it didn't happen. Detroit dropped another one to the New York Swats. This one, interestingly enough, had the 2 top pitchers in terms of wins in the American League. Brett Saberhagen facing off against Hal Newhouser, and Newhouser actually came out ahead in this one, allowing just 1 earned run in 8 innings to improve to 9-2. Saberhagen drops to 9-3. He had won 8 straight starts, I believe. So Detroit will not have home field advantage in the postseason. But in their final game, or not the final game, I guess they have one more, but in the last game they played, they did get their revenge, topping New York 11-8. It was kind of a slugfest there. Neither pitcher really very sharp. But of note in this game is that Alex Rodriguez hit 3 solo home runs. So he hit a homer in the first, a homer in the second, and a homer in the eighth in this one. Finished with 4 RBI. That put him in the lead for homers in the American League with 16 heading to the last game of the season. So, of note, he's had a couple of 2-homer games earlier this year. He's kind of had a slow second half in terms of power. Hadn't hit very many homers. He did have a 2-homer game just a few games ago, though. So with these 3, he's getting up there again. But he started off pretty hot in terms of homers earlier in the season and kind of cooled down in the second half. Of course, he's still doing really well. If we look at the other game that I was going to take note of, that's Boston. Boston had been kind of in the running for catching Detroit, and they are getting swept by the Oakland Jacks in the final series. So they've lost all 3 games of the final series here. This one they lost 5-2, and this one they've lost 5-2. So they lost back-to-back 5-2 games. And so not having a great end to their season. As I said, one more game left to play. If we look at the standings here, heading into the final games of the season, final day of the season, May 31st. Remember, I'm playing 1/3 of a season, so 54 games. Detroit has a 5-game lead over Boston. It wasn't very long ago where those teams were kind of neck and neck. But Boston, of course, has lost 4 straight now. So they're fading fast here in the American League. And kind of the days of them having a shot at the World Series are way behind them now. Likewise, St. Louis Wizards are very hot. I think they've won 7 of their last 8 games. They've won the first 3 games here against Chicago. And they're going to end up with close to a 9-game lead over LA when all is said and done. And even home field advantage wasn't very close, as they have a 4-game lead over Detroit at this point for home field advantage, thanks to Detroit losing a couple games to New York there prior to the last one that they played. So again, we have one more game for each of these teams to go to finish out the regular season before we head to the postseason, the World Series here. I also wanted to show the stats heading into the final day. So are there any particular stats that we're going to have to follow into the last day of the season here? And I think we have Tony Gwynn has pretty much wrapped up the batting title in the National League. He's hitting 362 heading to the last game. Stan Musial, as actually his teammate, is in second right now with a 327 average. As you remember, Pujols actually has a 360-something average, but doesn't have enough plate appearances to qualify. And if you added enough plate appearances to get him to qualify, his average wouldn't still be 362 to top Tony Gwynn. On the American League side, Ichiro is actually should win that title with a 358 average. Ted Williams has been slumping here in the past several weeks, I'd say. He's hitting 333. Slugging, Dick Allen is leading the American League with a 667 slugging. He even better than A-Rod, who leads the league in homers. And Stan Musial leads in slugging on the National League side, 631. Now, on base percentage, Ted's still in the lead in that, 444. But again, he's really slipped here in the past few weeks. He's just gone really cold. If we head down to home runs, Stan Musial has 16 in the National League, and Alex Rodriguez has 16 in the American League. And, barring anything weird happening, they will probably finish in tops in the league for respectively. Alex Rodriguez has driven in 50 runs so far this year, heading into the final day on the American League side, and Stan Musial leading the National League in RBI with 47. So again, those are probably the top two hitters, and they're gonna be facing off in the World Series. Their teams will be. So pretty interesting to see. Heading down to stolen bases here, Kenny Lofton leads with 17 in the American League, and actually Tony Gwynn, surprisingly, leading the National League with 15. Now Lofton, he has 17 stolen bases, but he's been caught 14 times, so not a very good percentage. And if we look at the leader in strikeouts, Babe Ruth has struck out 63 times, again, in a third of a season, which is just way above what he did in real life. Barry Bonds in second with 56, again, way above what he did in real life. Just kind of interesting to see. Rounding that out, Sammy Sosa, Mike Schmidt, a lot of them National League, a lot of these National League players. In fact, Babe Ruth is one of only 3 in the top 10 in the American League. Number 2 being Alex Rodriguez, number 3 being Ken Griffey Jr. Notably absent from this list, who I expected that would be in the tops on this list, Reggie Jackson. He hasn't struck out as much as he tends to do in real life, but he's also hitting below 200, well below 200, so not having the great season regardless of the strikeouts. So just interesting thing to note. I didn't do the pitching. I guess I could do that real quick. Again, we only have 1 day left in the season, so there probably won't be a lot of movement here. But Juan Marichal will lead the National League with 2.39 ERA. Koufax second with a 2.50. Pedro Martinez, who started in relief and just got moved to the starting rotation in towards the second half, leading the American League with a 2.51. Notably absent, though, from this list, you notice there's 3 St. Louis starters on this list, top 10 ERAs, and no Detroit Rockets. So it'll be interesting in the World Series to see if Detroit's offense can overcome the pitching here. We have 3 starting pitchers with 9 wins, Saberhagen, Carl Hubble, and Hal Newhouser. I mentioned some of them earlier today. In terms of strikeouts, Koufax, the league lead in strikeouts with 96, followed by Gooden and Randy Johnson in the American League, all 3 in the American League. Nolan Ryan tops in the National League, excuse me. Nolan Ryan tops in the American League with 92 to finish out the season. In terms of saves, the top 2 teams here in the saves category are the World Series teams. You have Tom Henke with 15 and Bruce Sutter with 14. Lee Smith also with 14 there in the National League. American League, the second place American League was Satchel Paige with only 9. So not as many saves in the American League with the heavy offense. So interesting stuff to see. If we look at quality starts down here, Koufax led with 12. Unfortunately, it didn't totally translate into wins for him. So yeah, I think that kind of sums things up. As I mentioned, we are heading into the final day of the season here. So one more game here before we head to the World Series. My plan is once I finish this final day, we'll kind of take a look at some stats. I'll probably take a video and go through kind of team by team to kind of show you those stats. And if any of you are interested in particular players, 2 things. One, you can head over to baseballmaelstrom.com at any point to find those stats out. And 2, you can just watch the video or drop a comment, and I'll try to follow up on that particular player's stats if you're interested that way too. In any event, we are getting down to it here. Appreciate all of you for watching so far. If you like the video, click the like button. Check out my video on the next projects that are going to be coming up on the channel. Those will be probably in the next few weeks. World Series will take some time as I play that one out. And I'm going to record those games being played. Try a live stream maybe if I can figure out the tech on that. But anyway, thanks for stopping by and watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this journey. And until next time, have a great evening.